Hey Chanel, hey Jay. Happy New Year to all.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, Emily. Hi, Jay. Happy New Year.
Awesome. Okay. How was your holidays, Jay?
They were good. I got to spend some of it with my family, so that was nice. But I spent a lot of time working.
Same here. Yeah, I was hoping to take off a whole week, but I was like, nope, that's not happening.
Chanel, on
Yes.
this newsletter, it says to go to the website to subscribe so I can get like the Zoom links regularly sent to me. Is it that I just subscribe to the calendar on this thing, or because I want to be able to receive all the meeting notices basically.
If you have you been getting any emails? Like,
The only, like, when it comes to committees, the only email I get is transportation sometimes.
hmm,
And that's it.
perhaps you maybe unsubscribe to the mailing list somehow. Let me check. One moment.
No.
Wait, yeah, Chanel, shouldn't he be getting the same panelist emails that I
Well, Zoom
received?
is different. Yeah, like I send that to everyone. If you're talking about the Zoom itself, then maybe you should check like another folder. But I do send it like when everybody else gets
Oh,
it.
sorry, I misunderstood. Was Jay talking about the newsletter?
I
No.
think so. No.
What I got the newsletter. What I'm talking about is when the committee meetings are happening, because I didn't know I can join the executive committee meetings because I never got a notice when they were happening.
Okay, so those are the newsletters because the executive, like, it's just a different group that gets
Right.
the panelist links, and then if you get the newsletters, like you would receive like the general link for you to join.
And
Um, but if you're not
so,
getting the newsletters, like with
well,
the
this is the
meeting
first time I've gotten
information,
this newsletter,
hmm,
and um I'm on it right now. So how do I like if I wanted to, because you're saying it's in the links are in the newsletter.
Yeah, I never
the
looked for
links are
that.
like they're emails I sent, like they're sent like with the meeting information, the agenda's usually attached, things like that. But let me check on my end. How do you appear on the site? One moment.
Okay.
Yeah, Chanel, I'd like to know that too. I never attend any of the other committee meetings because of that.
We could order another one of those.
Hey, Kimberly, welcome.
Hi, Emily. How are you? Hey, Jay.
Great. Happy New Year.
New Year, everybody.
I got water before we start. Hey, Marshall. Can you hear me? Not sure if it-
Hey, Emily, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yes.
This is nice weather we're having this time of year. Yeah. It's hot out. Right.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hey, Mario.
Hello. Sorry about that. I was having like some Zoom wanted to update like last minute. I'm like, no.
Yep. When an update is needed, it happens.
Exactly
Happy
at the
New
most.
Year.
Yes, thank you. Happy New Year to you, Aisha, and everyone.
Hi, Aisha.
Hi.
Richard said he's joining later in the chat.
Okay. And I know Michelle cannot make it. She did send me a text about that earlier today.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. But I'm always confused about our quorum number.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
of-
I think it's 6, right?
I
We-
think it's 6.
We definitely have 6 now. Yay, Richard made it.
Here,
Oh my gosh.
Richard
is-
is going to be in transit, so he might be a spotty participant for about 20 minutes.
It doesn't matter. We have met quorum. I've never met quorum this quickly since I started.
Okay, that's
So-
our first priority for the new year. Now we got to get 4 or 5 more.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. There you go. Teamwork
Awesome.
makes the dream work.
Okay. So let me
Um,
just,
Do you want to kick it off, Emily?
yeah, let's
Great, thank
Let's
you.
get started, y'all. I'm so happy that we were able to meet quorum so quickly. It's we met quorum at 7:03 p.m. So welcome everyone. Happy holidays, happy New Year if I didn't say it before. So let's just jump right in. Not sure if Mariel, you want to say something before, but I know that the one thing that I was concerned about, I even had a nightmare about it. If anyone needs to reapply because they're term limited here on the community board, just don't forget. I know that there's always like a lot going on. Fill out the application so that you could get reappointed if you're still interested. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to mention before. And Marielle, is there anything you want to mention before we start?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, definitely. I think the application is now open. I believe it's due sometime in March. So
Oh, it is? I
there's-
thought it was like in January, February that it came out. Okay.
no, it is out. I did see that the community board application is out, but I think the deadline is some point in March. I don't remember the exact date. I'll need to check.
Okay, I'll check that again
yeah.
because I just remember one year I had to fill it out and I kept getting emails. Okay, cool.
But just I guess maybe really quickly, hi everyone, Happy New Year. I will take minutes for this month's meeting just because things will get very busy for me in the following months. So I can do it for January, but always looking for volunteers to do it for future months. So, if there's a month that's particularly slow for you or, somewhat lighter than others, please do help because it is a committee effort. And thank you to Michelle, although she's not on, for preparing the December minutes. And then you can start with welcome and introductions, Emily.
Sure. Okay, so let's do intros. Let's see, Marielle, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone I know. And those may be watching on YouTube. Yes, my name is Marielle Ali, and I've been on the community board to end change kind of years with a brief hiatus, but I'm here. And I'm chair of the Housing and Human Services Committee.
Awesome. And Jay, want to go next?
Yes, I'm Jay Bias. I'm one of the new members appointed since last year of May, and born and raised in Washington Heights all my life.
Awesome. Bruce, want to go next?
Sure. Happy New Year, everybody. Bruce Robertson, community board about 4 years on this committee, going on 3 years actually this year, and resident 22 years, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Marshall?
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm Marshall Vanderpool. I'm a resident of Dyckman Houses. I just wanted to take a moment to mention that I guess on December 14th, there were elections, and I did not stand for re-election after, I guess, 20 years to be the first vice president of Resident Association. So I have stepped down from that. And I don't know if there is some sort of, I guess, reapplication. I would have to consider whether I would be remaining on the community board. I'm trying to retire in a lot of senses as far as work and all that. So I don't know. I don't feel well today, so I don't like making decisions when I don't feel quite right. But I'm going to land my plane here, and thank you for your time.
Did you get a gold watch?
No, I haven't retired from work yet, but I work for the government. They don't give you gold watches. They give you the back of the hand, you know. So.
A plastic pen, right? Thanks.
Oh, right
No,
now,
they save that for the person who's going to replace me.
Yeah.
right now you're fighting for the health care, right, Marshall?
Well, that's kind of one of my concerns.
Yeah.
Why I haven't jumped off the merry-go-round yet.
Monday is a hearing at Carmen de la Rosa's committee, so everybody's going to protest.
Okay, well, I'm gonna step back.
Well, thanks, Marshall. And 20 years is a long time. It's a long time. Kimberly?
Hi, my name is Kimberly McCoy, and I am new. I also, like Jay, just started in May, and I've been living in Washington Heights well over 20 years. Went to college here, worked here at a school, so I'm a big fan of this area. And I'm glad to be here with you kind people.
Aw, that's great to hear, Kimberly. And Aisha?
Happy New Year. My name is Aisha Oldeby. I've been on the board I'm going for 10 years now. I've been on this committee since the very beginning of that. I'm also on land use. And I just wanted to say thank you to Marshall. I hope that we get to keep you, if possible, because I don't think that the public member position is contingent on your position at NYCHA. So if just to put my 2 cents in, but thank you for your service, having been here since you started. But yeah, I'll land my plane there. Oh, and what's the hearing that you were talking about, Bruce? At Carmen de la Rosa.
The public service employees. There's a bill to change it to privatization of the health insurance, and it's a big deal because a lot of people would lose their benefits. So State Senator Robert Jackson is opposing it, and it kind of got dumped in Carmen's lap, from what I understand, and there's a hearing on Monday that people are going to protest. There was I think there was a city hall demonstration today or tomorrow. I'm not really up on it, but it's something that's been in the media for a while.
Mm,
Interesting. Thank you.
yes. Thanks. And Richard, I know you said you're out in the streets. I do not want to put you in danger, but if you'd like
I'm-
to, yeah.
I'll catch you right here. I'm Richard Allman.
uh-huh.
You know, all the greetings that everyone else has sent, I send them back and extend them. I'm Richard Allman. I live in Washington Heights. I've been on the community board for quite a while. You know, I don't actually remember what the first year was, but I'm at least up there in Aisha territory. I'm on this committee. I've had the opportunity to serve on other committees professionally. I'm helping to run senior centers right now, and my own history includes considerable work as a tenant organizer and working with affordable housing advocacy organizations.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
And, yeah, I didn't introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Marte. I am co-chair of the Housing and Human Services Committee. I joined the community board to substitute someone who had to leave their term earlier, I think like fall of last year. And I just started
It
the
was Marielle.
No, it
Oh.
like before Marielle. It was like the
Oh,
fall
Daryl.
before.
Daryl, sorry.
It was substituting like a regular board member. Like when I interviewed, I didn't get in. And then they said, oh, somebody finished their term early. Come on. And I was like, yeah. So I joined like in the middle of I was just like, what am I doing? And then, so I'm still learning, and yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm not an expert in housing, but I'm definitely trying to learn. So we're all on the same level here. We're all on the same boat. So yes, so let's get started, y'all. Everyone received the agenda. We didn't send out like a document. We just sent out a list. And the first item, which I will pass over to Marielle, is committee planning priorities for this year.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, that's exactly right. So as I shared in the email, we have a new executive committee, our elected officers for 2023. And so our new chairperson for the community board, as you all know, is Catherine Diaz. And so she did email all of the committee chairs asking each committee to identify 3 to 5 goals for 2023. Really goals that are SMART. So, you know, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So not just we want to, you know, do this, but how can we achieve, you know, a particular event or, you know, some advocacy on a legislation or whatever the case may be. And so we do have to report back to it. And so all of the committees will be doing this exercise this month. And so maybe if we can take maybe 15 minutes to do some thinking around that. I know that last time, I believe it was possibly November, I think it was the November meeting, where the committee discussed some initial ideas on things to look forward to in 2023 and things to work on. I have some initial thoughts, and maybe I can share what those are, and we can go into a conversation and agree on some of those goals that we can all work towards together this year. So the first is around mental health. And so and I'll talk a little bit more about this under new business, but we've been working closely, we as in Emily and I, with Steve from Health and Environment Committee. They, you know, with the administration's policy on addressing mental health that was discussed or kind of released back in December, there is a lot of kind of, you know, backlash on the approach for the administration. If you recall, a lot of it was about, if people are in mental health, experiencing a mental health crisis, that the individuals would be locked up or kind of, sent to receive medical attention against their will, even if they did not want to. And so there's obviously a lot of kind of backlash in terms of how that can be handled in a better manner. So that would be one particular thing in terms of what that could look like. I haven't given that much thought, but the reason why I bring up health and environment is because we're looking to have a joint meeting at some point this year, hopefully before spring, with the Health and Environment Committee to address this exact topic. So that's one thing that I wanted to put on your agenda. The second would be something around the worst landlords list. I know that the list came out not too long ago, and it's also around the advocacy that Aisha and the tenants from 705 and 709 have been doing. And I do have a follow-up update for all of you from Department of Buildings that I'll share later on and under old business as well. And so kind of doing some work around that. What it looks like, again, I haven't given it too much thought. Maybe it is a town hall of sorts where we could, maybe invite, the electeds, maybe, a representative from the public advocate's office, those types of things to really address this and bring more light to the issue. I know that there was a press, there was a kind of a press issue or, there was a press around it when the list was released. And I recall, I believe it happened the same day of our general meeting. And I think there was one more, Emily, that I shared with you that I cannot remember right now. Fort Washington Armory, which would be the public forum, which we've been discussing. And so that would be three things that I think would be good for us to address. Obviously, they're quite big things, but just wanted to put that all for you all to think, consider, but also to challenge and also to offer other suggestions as well. Thanks. Bruce.
Yeah, the community information database that we worked on a year or so ago and did a resolution and sent it downtown to Mark Levine's office, and they kind of just sat on it and didn't do anything. I think it's still a good idea. So that's one thing I'd like to add to the agenda for 2023.
For sure. And really, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Thank you, because Emily and I were speaking earlier, and she also brought that up as well. Kind of, what's the follow-up to that? I know that, particularly you, Aisha, worked quite hard on putting that together, or that resolution together. And so it would be great to kind of see some of that move forward. I think that's a great suggestion. I think I saw Kimberly first and then Aisha.
I know all of the three that you mentioned, but what is the community information database?
Yeah, for sure. I can kind of, maybe Bruce, do you want to tell Kimberly about it?
I'd rather let Aisha talk about it because she's more ingrained in this kind of thing from before my time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind
Not
it,
a problem.
Aisha?
Oh,
Go ahead,
no, of
Aisha.
course. So to begin with, I think part of what we intended to do has been done by the board staff as far as updating the PDF that we've always had on record. Honestly, I haven't taken a look at it yet. Has anybody seen it to
No.
see if
No.
some of the stuff that we thought would be important is in there? So I guess we have to take a look at that.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the secondary thing that came out of the discussions that we had was to build a database that would definitely be for our district, but it's my feeling that it could be citywide because the technology, the efforts technologically to implement it would be the same. And actually it's more work to try to restrict it to our district than if you just did it wholesome for the entire city using API. So basically it's to raise the visibility and make information about the resources available to people in our constituencies relevant to them more accessible by building a database. So part of the spirit of it is like when you call 311, it's not always easy to navigate 311. You may spend 10 minutes of your phone call just going through the gamut of questions that they want to ask you about what it is that you're looking for, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get something that's accurate, or sometimes they kind of like try to funnel you into whatever their thoughts are about what you're looking for, instead of you being able to navigate it yourself, put in your demographic information and be able to find all the things that you're eligible for. I think one of the wonderful things about our city, and I've learned this in advocating for people in other cities, is that we have a wealth of resources that are available to us that a lot of other cities don't have. But most of us don't know what they are because it's difficult to get access. So that's the intention of the database, to make it easier.
Thanks, Aisha. Does that help, Kimberly?
It does help. I'm just wondering, so when you say resources, do you mean like it would literally be a book of like an inventory of all types of resources that someone may be looking for in New York?
And more
Or
like a website and app.
Yeah, something that's digital, because right
Okay.
now, what we have, as Aisha mentioned, is a PDF document on the community board website. And we did, in leading up to this, I remember we reached out to several other community boards, or we did some research to see what other community boards were doing. Some also used the PDF, others had an actual web page with links, that were constantly updated. There are a lot of different approaches. There's no standard approach. And this resource document has things from, like food pantries, information on, just really a wealth of, mental health services, so on and so forth, things that people can really, again, use as a document when they're in need of, a particular service or looking for a particular type of service. And so we did pass the resolution, and I can share it, but you can also find it on the website, where it's calling for, it to be digitized, and like Aisha said, an app or a website of some sort, to make it a little bit easier, more accessible, and more real time.
And it would break everything down by district?
So,
like by community board district, or just Upper Manhattan, Lower Manhattan?
so we didn't get into those details, but we did call for something, if I recall correctly, and anyone on the committee can correct me if I'm forgetting. But you can search. The idea is, you can search by location area. You can do by language. Obviously, it depends ultimately on what platform is used, but the resolution itself calls on the Manhattan Borough President's office to support with this.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
The idea is if you need a local mental health help, and you go Google mental health, you're going to get, the whole city landscape. You need somebody in your neighborhood you can talk to and start with. So that was the idea.
Exactly.
But like Aisha said, the database is just a database. You can put everything in there and anybody can search in any neighborhood. So if you put in 10032 and say, I need mental health help because, domestic abuse, and it's not a 311 thing. It's not a cop thing. It's like, who do I talk to about how do I deal with my family situation?
Mhm.
Right now, if you go to our CB12 website, there's a static PDF with some information which you should check out, but it's not really current.
And it doesn't allow you to determine what you're eligible for based on what that agency's or organization's catchment might be. So that, you might spend a lot of time spinning your wheels, talking to different, organizations that you're not even eligible for those things. So it just make life easier for people.
Great, thank you. Aisha, I know that you had your hand up, and it's so please go ahead for
So
other committee priorities.
On land use yesterday, part of the conversation was about how to create better partnerships with the electeds in regards to resolutions and initiatives that are created by the committee. And I know I've spoken some about this here, about how streamlining and having like a system of tracking where we are with things, right? Because there's a bunch of resolutions over time, the entire 9 years that I've been here, that things have been passed and even before I got here. But what happened with those resolutions, right? So where do we stand? What are we doing? Has the elected done anything about it? Are they still needed and necessary? I sent out an email in December to the committee in regards to one of the resolutions that we worked hard on and got passed and then didn't see the light of day. So I feel like part of the work of holding our own board accountable to follow through on those types of things is us having our own structure, so we know when the ball is being dropped our own selves here in committee, so that we can empower ourselves more. You know, we're all volunteers and we are all here for a reason. And, you know, I think it becomes in vain if there's no follow through. So something that helps us streamline to make sure, you know, at least we get answers or we create the conversations that we want to create with the people who serve us.
Thank you, Aisha. And I know that you've shared this suggestion in the past as well. Yeah, and I can definitely see something like that helping because there's so many issues that we kind of started the conversation on, or we start some action on, and then, you know, it's kind of hard to keep track or follow up or know who's next in line to act on it. And so that could help keep ourselves accountable as well. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts in terms of, you know, committee priorities? Because again, as I shared in the email, these can be either external, which we have a few external, and then we have one internal, which is the one that you just shared, Aisha, which I think is a great one. Anything else that anyone has in mind?
Can I go again if no one else has something?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So we spoke some about priorities that people had ideas for in December. I don't remember what they all were in this moment. I know I have notes somewhere, but something that is definitely close to my heart in just over the last few years is the issues with fire that are affecting not just our community, but the city in general. And I'm actually advocating for families right now that have been in fires in our district. And what I see there is an opportunity for us to lean into the human services hat that we wear, because even though I've, you know, attempted to get close to this issue over the years, seeing people affected by it, I still don't have a full understanding of what's the recourse that families have when these things are happening, when they're in a fire, when the building is in a fire. What is the landlord's obligation? What is the city's obligation? What are the agency's obligations? What human services are offered to people that are victims of fire? And some of what I've learned, I don't like. And so I definitely want to be an advocate in that regard, to stand in the gap for people who are experiencing something that is probably one of the hardest things that they probably will experience for some people, is being victim of fire. And then, you know, on the other end of that is our positions about the policies that maybe allow for more fires to happen. I have an email that I wrote to Department of Buildings previously, and I spoke to someone at the fire department as well about the fact that a lot of our buildings are pre-war. So the room that I'm sitting in right now has one outlet. So, and I'm a technologist, so I'm definitely daisy chaining, you know, to get the sufficient amount of electricity to power the things that I'm doing. But that lends towards hazards and risk, right? And so I know I just recently I've been working at a fire equipment company, one of the biggest in the country, and I learned a lot about the fire protection laws, that there's been advocacy around what's needed there. And so I feel like that's something that we might be able to lean into to, you know, safeguard our community in that area.
Great, thank you, Aisha. I'm taking notes as the meeting is happening, so if I'm looking away, that's why. Great, just wanted to check and see if, oh, I think I see something in the Q&A. Okay, oh, okay, that's good. Just wanted to see if either Jay or Kimberly, if you, or Marshall, if you all have ideas for committee priorities.
I think you said a couple good ones. I don't have any ideas per se. I think I saw your email this morning, which is one of the things I actually spoke to the new chair and vice chair, which is engaging elected officials, which I thought was good. You know, an idea around that engagement is, at least as it pertains to committees or anything like that, kind of what you're doing, right? Discussing like what are your priorities for your district when it comes to housing and human services? What are you fighting for? Kind of like having them update us, you know, like, you know, you're not going to come to every meeting. You can send an email with the list of the things you're fighting for, right? Because then that gives us an idea what's the focus. I know this coming year, the focus is affordable housing for both the state and the city, right? Now, now the conversation has shifted that we need more supply. So the question is, what type of supply do we need, right? We don't need market rate, but is that what's going to happen? So those type of things when it comes to engaging elected officials.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Kimberly?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do like the things that were mentioned. The only thing that I had not heard of before was the inventory. So that's why I asked about it. But one thing that I do think actually should be added to the priority, and I like it for a different reason, is the fires that Aisha just mentioned, because like she said, it does affect a lot of people, but you know, some in the way to prevent it, a good way to do that is to speak to children, speak to schools, you know, have firefighters go in. Like she went in and she spoke to people who deal with it. But if we could even get that information to children, I know one way to get parents and adults to think differently about what they do is through children. I remember when I was a child and being in school, and I remember they came in, health was a big deal. I grew up in East Harlem, and I'll never forget, they came and they were like, you should not keep using oil. You should not reuse oil. It's not good for you. And they spoke about how it wasn't good for you. And I remember having this discussion with my mother at the age of like 8 or 9. And I was like, and this is why it's not good for you. And we shouldn't do this anymore. And we should stop. And she said, okay. And we stopped. And I was so shocked that I was able to have that kind of effect on her at such a young age, because my mother, I don't even mess with her now. So it was, that always makes me understand how influential children can be. And she's right. We do live in pre-war buildings, a lot of us. I do too. And I have stopped daisy chaining. And if I do, there's a very particular way, like I'm sure she knows, hello, sweetheart, that it has to be done, because it can be so dangerous. Right. So just, you know, just thinking about how we can, you know, take it to adults to help the adults that are going through it, you know, who have children, a lot of them, and then also bring it to children to help them. I think that would be I think that's a good priority. And I think it's something that can have a lot of legs and it can go really far.
For sure. Thank you. So just a quick thing on that. So I know in the past, I recall that we've had presentations from the fire department, FDNY, give not only to us as the community board and obviously, open to the public as well. But I believe that a lot of that it's tricky, and that some of it also falls within the realm of health and environment. And so I know they do a lot of work on that as well. And maybe that's something that we can, follow up with Steve to see if that's on their radar for 2023. Kind of where the overlap is, where can we help from our side of the committee? Where can health and environment work on it? And we can kind of, do something joint, as we're hoping to do, like I mentioned, for mental health.
You know what? Actually, sorry, one last thing.
No, go ahead, please.
I'm in the same, I realize Aisha and I are in the same committees. Last night, one of the other things they had mentioned was, like you just said, the different committees and how they cross and how there'll be different things to discuss. So some topics sort of cross others. And I remember and I don't remember if they got really into it, but it was mentioned how sometimes different committees will have to come together maybe, or there might be an initiative where they could come together. So like you said, I forgot what other service you said it would be for fires, but maybe we can have something with youth and education so that we can sort of figure that out too, right? And maybe that's something we should be thinking about, how the initiatives that we want to prioritize, are there other committees that we can, sort of cross-reference with so that we can make it stronger?
Great. Thank you. Quite a bit that we've discussed, and very ambitious for 2023. But as I always say, it takes a team to do it. And so, if we're all committed to get to work and do it, then I think a lot of this can be accomplished, and, kind of come up with, again, SMART goals. How do we make all of these ideas SMART? So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. That's the program manager in me speaking. So with that, I'll pass it over to Emily to lead the discussion on engaging elected officials on housing and human services. But before I do, I did note that there are some people in the public. Thank you for joining. And if there are any kind of thoughts from your end on things that the committee should focus on this year, if you could just drop them in the Q&A, we would love to kind of also hear from you, what some of your thoughts and ideas are. Okay, over to you, Emily, to talk about engaging elected officials. Thanks.
Thanks. And it's a perfect segue because it's already part of our 3 to 5 or maybe more SMART goals that we're going to do. So hopefully all of the things that we just mentioned, we could make them SMART goals and then actually go for it. And I know that Mariel, she's very good at this. So I'm learning from her, taking notes. But yeah, I think the 5th thing that we mentioned was already creating better partnerships or collaborating more with elected officials. And I would even add to that, Mariel, collaborating with agencies better as well. So I'm not sure if there's there's 2 different goals for that, but just collaborating in general with elected officials and agencies, that would be good. But right now, the next agenda item is specifically in regards to engaging with elected officials on housing and human services topics. And as Jay said before, these elected officials should already be updating us constantly with whatever new things are happening. But we'd like to basically just create a list of all the elected officials that you all would like to hear from for housing and human services, and in regards to housing and human services. And maybe we could go from there. Let's see.
Can I add one thing, Emily, as well?
Mhm.
I guess also in addition to that, as you saw in the email, but also for the record, so tomorrow we have a meeting with Carmen de la Rosa's office, one of our council members that covers our area, to discuss the council members' priorities on and as it relates to housing and human services issues. So I would appreciate from all of you if there are any particular questions or things that you would like me to raise on behalf of the committee. It would be good to have that, but also to hear, again, we're working to have a meeting with the council member that currently chairs the city council's committee on housing as well at some point later this month. And so there's an opportunity, again, as we were talking about, how can we do more around engaging elected officials? Here's our opportunity. We've identified some goals that we would like to work towards this year, but if there are any kind of specific things that you would like, again, me to raise on behalf of the committee, then I can do so. Thanks.
So we're asking not only for the elected officials we want to hear from, but also what kind of questions we want to ask them? Anything else? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, were you gonna say something else?
Go ahead, Aisha. I was going to say Aisha.
So, I was thinking about this before you brought that up, and I think it definitely fits in this area, which is, and it has come up in committee previously, specifically when we had a meeting. I think the meeting was about homelessness, and we had different city agencies represented in that meeting. And this is about silos, how these different entities of our city government work towards similar goals, but they are all operating in silos, and the impact that that has on our residents when they're going through, matters of life that one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, sometimes can be catastrophic. And they admitted that in that meeting. And so my first question is what is being done in that regard? And I think if we look to the health community, there are changes that have been made in the health community to address the fact that, someone might be going to all these different doctors for different things in different buildings in different places, and one doctor doesn't know what the other is doing. So now they're bringing them under the same roof so that you're in the same building, you're seeing, caretakers that can have conversations with each other, that can all look at your chart, that can all know your whole health experience so that mistakes are not made, right? And I feel like, we need to bring an aspect of that into the human services environment, because it puts people through a lot of stress and hardship when, sometimes the ball is dropped, or sometimes one agency could witness that things are happening for that person, but because it is not their charge, it's kind of like, it's not my job, I don't know what to tell you, and the person is left in the wind. And so I would like to see how we can push forward a conversation about changing that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like in any kind of system or even organization with their committees, subcommittees, there's always some kind of an issue with silos. So I would even say, even in the very community board, and how Kimberly mentioned, for one of the goals would be to collaborate more with other committees. So that's the same for even elected officials. So that's a great question. What are they doing to address silos that are created so that it would be a more unified way to address issues in the city, right?
Yes.
What else, y'all?
At least so when it comes to gauging them, I guess since one of the outlying things has been this Fort Washington Armory, I think when it comes to engaging the elected officials in our district, well, that represent the Armory, right? And what the resolution is calling for is, it would be having a conversation with the members on it as well, to have a collaboration there.
to collaborate with the members that are involved or in charge of the Fort Washington Armory.
Yeah, that represented.
Wait, what do you mean when you say represented? People who work for the entity?
No, like that, if, like that it is in their district.
In their district or region.
Yeah,
The
geographically.
council person, the council people?
Yeah, the council person, the Congress person,
Right.
everybody.
Thanks,
Right.
Jay. I'm taking notes. I took my camera off, but I'm taking notes.
Mhm. Any other contributions you'd like to make on how to engage elected officials more on housing and human services, or even just questions that you'd like to ask for the ones that we do get a hold of?
Well, in the same vein of what Kimberly and I have spoken about, what we talked about in land use yesterday, how to better partner with them so that when we send out resolutions, it's actually, the beginning of a conversation and not the end of one. That we can have an understanding what their political will is to push it forward, whether it's their charge, whether it's feasible, whether we need to do more work, whatever that might be, that the resolution's a conversation starter that hopefully can have, a goal attached to it that we can, meet at some point.
Mhm.
So.
I actually look, and I mean, I know that I'm new, so I apologize. I know a lot of my questions are, well, what's with this and what's with that? But I live not far from the Armory. I used to go there for years before to take language classes, and I am wondering what is going on over there. Like, I know there was a point where there was a homeless shelter. And I also know there was a point where there were like other activities going on, and those things seem to have existed going on at the same time. So I don't know what happened after the pandemic. I don't know when it stopped. And I just would like some more information on that.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
So Kimberly, we will address this during old business. We're going to address the public forum aspect of the resolution. There is a resolution that was passed, and it has been circulated, and I can recirculate it. And it does provide a lot of context. There was a lot of work that went into it, and a lot of that credit goes to Aisha and some of the public members that are also on the call this evening in terms of putting that work advocacy around it. But for the purposes of right now, we're just focusing on how we can engage our elected representatives. So I did note Jay's question about, for those that, kind of within there, that falls within their jurisdiction, so to speak, or their area, their district, what are they doing as it relates to that and the resolution? We want to keep it specific to what's called for in the resolution.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, all good. Good question.
Kimberly, if you share your email, I don't have it in this list when they sent the resolution. I can just bump it for you so you can read it. It does have a lot of information. It's kind of wild.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just for future notice, not just for yourself, Kimberly, but for everyone, the resolutions are all on the community board website as well. But yeah, I see that Richard is back. Maybe, I don't know, Emily, you want to go just update Richard in terms of what we're discussing, and then we can get back to that point.
Yeah, sure. So Richard, we just spoke about committee planning priorities for 2023, and we listed about 7 goals, and I guess we're going to pick 5 out of those that basically our chairperson is going to help us achieve throughout the next year. So we spoke about mental health, landlord issues in New York City, public forum for Fort Washington Armory, community information database, that's the resource directory, create better partnerships with elected officials and follow up after those resolutions are created here in the community board. Issues with fire, just like all these questions come up for fire, and then collaborating with other committees in the community board so that there's not too many silos there. So now we're talking about one of those issues, which is engaging with elected officials on housing and human services issues. And not sure if you joined us when Mariel was mentioning, or she sent it in the email, that she's going to have a meeting with Carmen de la Rosa tomorrow and at some point with a councilwoman. So if there's any questions or issues that you would like to bring forward, or any ideas that you have on engaging elected officials.
If I could, just before doing that, the list is a good list of potential priorities. I'd like to suggest two things just in how we approach those priorities. One, as much as possible, that we move towards policy and budget work, which, at least from my perspective, is the largest part of what a community board is here for. And secondly, just maybe it's tonight, maybe it's next month, but that we take a look at how we run meetings and what we can all contribute to, better run and maybe a little bit crisper meetings.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for that? Because we're planning on making these goals SMART goals, so they have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound.
Tua? I'm a little bit concerned that the comments I make might be opening up a discussion. I don't want to do that. If I can just comment.
We could take note of it. We'll take
Okay.
note of it, being that it's the last agenda item, and then
I mean,
we could just like.
Some of that on meetings belongs to the chair. Some of it belongs to all of us, that when we can do a sentence on something, we don't do a paragraph. That as much as it's a room full of wise and experienced people, as much as we can stay, on point. And, I know that's a subjective judgment. It's not an objective measure, but that I'd say that we don't use every opportunity to tell people everything we know about every topic in front of us, but that as much as we can, we move towards decision, towards resolution, etc. That's never perfect, and it sort of reflects my biases. And I know in a place where, we need to be able to speak from a lot of different voices, it'll never be perfect, but I hope we move in that direction some.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So hopefully along the way we'll build strategies on doing that, and just being honest in meetings. It's I'm completely new at this. I'm not good at interrupting people, so I know that I would be like the chair in these meetings. So yeah, I really appreciate people's honesty. So if people say like that others are long-winded, or we've heard of this before, or I understand that also there's newer public members, and it's good to also inform them about things as well. So I do understand like re-explaining, but I also like understand having a succinct meeting that's action-based and like everyone knows the backstory. Let's just like get it done. So that's my tug of war here, as like becoming chair, co-chair, and like leading a meeting. So I do appreciate you saying that. I do also think that I have to like get moving sometimes, and I don't know how to, so I just let people talk. So I could also get the background story, because most of the time I don't have it. So
I'm pretty good at that, Emily. I can. Let's move it, guys.
yeah.
Just really quickly before we go over to Aisha and Jay, thank you, Richard. I think that's a valid point. We're all volunteers here, but we're also serving the community. And so there's a balance that we need to find. in being able to, speak our thoughts on particular issues, but also being succinct and to the point. And I think that's something that we can all work on. I think I saw Aisha and then Jay. Go ahead.
So just quickly before I go, just for the purpose of clarity, Marshall Vanderpool is our honorable public member. The rest of us are the members, and then there's the members of the public. So I just want to say that because then, like, when you make the reference, then it's like, well, who are we talking about specifically? So just a point. But that being said, could we have point people, which is generally the liaison at the elected's office? However, I've seen over time how that may change, a person might leave, and sometimes the agreements that you may have disappear because now that memory is gone of whatever that was. And the reason why I say that is because maybe if we had a point person, they could email us updates from the office that are relevant to our purview so that we can know what to follow, know what's going on, what's new and great, what's not so great, so that we can be always speaking from a point of understanding when we are advocating for positions in our position.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great idea. And that goes with the point that was made earlier on, like, I think Jay said it, on having elected officials already be like constantly in contact with us and informing us. So having a liaison that, every so often to update us, that would be a great idea. And Jay, you also have your hand up.
Yeah, I just because of what Richard said, I thought of something that I really want the committee to do as a priority, and that's kind of engage organizations specifically towards housing and human services, invite them, kind of talk to us about what they do, right? Like what the services they provide in the catchment areas that they focus on. That way that is a resource we have, and we can narrow down every time there is a housing or human services issue that comes up. We're like, oh, we know an organization that can help with that. And that was for the priorities. But another thing for elected officials, come back to me. I just lost what I wanted to say about the engaging elected officials.
That happens. We're human. I got it. Kimberly?
Hi, so piggybacking off of what Aisha said about having a liaison at the elected official's office, who, like, in the community board, would be responsible for keeping up and letting us all know who these liaisons are and who we need to reach out to and when they're leaving, because that's a very good idea. But if, that's a wonderful idea. But if we don't know who they are, for some reason the person leaves or they go, like, then it could get lost, because that would be really important information to have, and it could be useful to all of us. Hello.
Can I come in on that, Emily?
Yeah.
Thanks. Jay, thanks for your point regarding the organizations is actually the next point on the agenda itself. What I would say is we've discussed a lot of priorities, and we definitely have more than 3 or 5. So we will need to kind of bring it down. And again, think about how we can make them achievable and realistic and time bound. But I'll bring back the point that Richard made earlier, which I think is really important. How can we think of these priority issues through the prism of a policy perspective or a financial perspective? So for instance, when we have the capital expenses that we do every year, when we rank those issues, are we, how are we ranking them to reflect the priorities that we're currently setting out? Is that, something, are we following up? What current legislation is going through city council on the issues that we've identified? Is there kind of any advocacy that we need to do as a committee on those issues to push that forward? To your point, Kimberly, so all of the, as you know, at the general meeting, all of the elected officials, either they themselves or a representative of their team, speak at the meetings. And, you know, they always have their short reports. But as it relates to a more specific, issue, you know, in terms of thematic issue related to, in this instance, housing and human services, it may be someone else. In terms of responsibility, I think that falls on the responsibility of the chair. So that would be myself, with the amazing support of Emily. Thank you. And so, you know, I think because there's a bit about ensuring that things are streamlined. And so that's why the idea is I'm getting a good night hug.
Aw.
So the other bit is around, thanks for your patience. So the reason why we're having these meetings, again, with Carmen De La Rosa's office tomorrow and with the other representative later this month, and the idea is to also have these meetings with all of the elected representatives that represent the area of that covers our community board, is to establish that relationship. And once that relationship is established, we can then identify a particular cadence of how often they update us, whether it's once a quarter, maybe they come to our meetings to give a specific update on this is what's happening on housing and human services as it relates to, you know, things in the city. This is what, you know, our elected is doing. Maybe it's an email once a month with a couple of sentences that, you know, we can share and I can read out and say, this is what they've said, and this is how we can follow up. So I hope that helps put things into context just a little bit more.
It does. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Oh,
Go ahead, Jay. Yep.
I remember now. When it comes to engaging elected officials on kind of like resident issues like the one that Aisha brought last time, right? That seemed like a very big deal that the elected officials should be involved in, and we should be able to collaborate in helping those buildings, because no one should live like that. And elected officials have the power to make the agencies do things more than we can.
Thank you. I've noted that. And I will say we do need to move on to the next point on the agenda. So just really quickly on that, Jay, I don't think that we can advocate specifically for each building on its own, if that makes sense. I mean, of course, if tenants come to us and say, hey, this is a situation happening in our building, then yes, we can say, these are the resources. This is who you need to contact. This is what you should do, as we did in the case for 705 and 709 West 170th Street. But I wonder if the wider point on what you just shared is, how can we as a committee be better about ensuring that residents of Community Board 12 know what resources they have if they have issues related to their housing and who they need to go to? Do they know who their elected representatives are? You know, those types of things. And so I wonder if it's, you know, something like that that we can do, almost like a marketing or a public service announcement.
That's the database.
Yeah.
In some
So-
instances, yes. But yeah,
Can I suggest one additional response on that?
sure.
I think we could look at having resources present at
That as
the,
well.
at this committee. Maybe that's legal services resources, maybe that's any of a number of things, both on the housing and human services side. And just as a heads up to the folks who are heading this committee, there was a very similar discussion this morning at the Aging Committee over how the committee gets out the resources that come in through the committee. And I think one of the suggestions is go to the executive committee with that, and let's look at that as a community board wide problem over how to get information out to both board members and to the community.
Great point. Thank you, Richard. Aisha, last point on this, please, and then we'll move on to the next point on the agenda.
I'll be brief. I just, the spirit of, and I've heard this before on the board in regards to like, we're only advisory and we're only should be focused on policy and budget. I don't agree completely. I do get that that is part of our charge, but were it not for entertaining some conversations, we don't even understand them on their face when we see them. We know that they're wrong, but we have no idea what the agency's responsibility is, what the trajectory of it is, what can be done about it, and who needs to be doing something about it. And at times, like specifically with 709 and 705, they actually attempted the things that we would provide them in a list of resources. So going, oh, this is all we can do is give you some resources, leaves them in the same rut. And it is through having the conversation of being able to say, this is happening, this doesn't seem right, we need the agency to appear. I think that is part of our charge as well. It is what helps us to know what's wrong with the policy. What is wrong, where inaction is happening, we won't know until we have the conversation. And we have the meeting of the minds of all of our wonderful contributions to say, here's what I think we can do about this. And then we take action. That's my opinion.
Just to add a couple words, since I guess it was some comments I made that were referenced there. I don't think there's any conversation we should be closed to. And the best policy comes out of individual experiences, what some people would say, what's learned in the field. I do think this committee would do well to look at the balance of how much time it puts into individual situations, and it isn't what we can or can't talk about so much as just looking what we're structured, what we have staff for, what volunteers can do, and what the greater missions are. I think the balance needs some tweaking, but I don't think there's any at least in my thought, any being closed to what comes in.
And I think what lends to that balance, you may have missed this because I think you were in your commute when we talked about this, is streamlining our process. The same happening with the board in general, as far as what should be happening when, after we take action, because there are many times we have conversations, we attempt to push the bar on things, and then they just kind of hang in limbo because there's no structure to say what's next. It exists. Some of it is coded into our bylaws, what should happen, but is it happening? Not necessarily. And so it ends up being a continuous carousel of conversation because nothing happened. So I feel like streamlining is a huge part of that.
Yes,
Great.
thank you,
Thank you
Aisha.
both.
And yeah, I was just gonna end it, but yes, thanks everyone for contributing. We're gonna take this into account and probably just like clean it up more and try and implement it throughout the year. And just to get things going because of the next agenda item, it's segueing to something that we already touched upon, which is having some kind of a list of community provider stakeholders for housing and human services. We already mentioned like that we want organizations to be participating here more. Not sure, Marielle, if you had something else intended for that item as well.
Sure, just briefly. So we'll of course use the current resource document as a starting point. And kind of start using that as a way to build relationships, because I think that's really key in order for us to, have any kind of impact on change and move things forward. So it's just really kind of a point if there are any particular organizations that you think we should be looking at for us to start doing that outreach towards.
Aisha, is that a hand from before or?
No, that's an old hand. I'll put it down.
Okay, and Jay?
Yeah, I guess, like Mario said, starting with that list we might have already, but we can also ask the elected officials, they should have their own list, right? I'm pretty sure they work with a lot of these organizations, nonprofit or for profit, that help for free or provide good services. And then from there, like Mario was saying, it doesn't have to be, it could be one every month, right? To invite them to talk to us about what they do and create that connection. So they can feel free, like if they have a new program that they just started, they can come again and say like, hey, now we're doing this. So just having some recommendations that we might not have on our list. Like, I guess we can share our list with the elected officials and ask like, do you have any other organizations around the housing and human services that you think we should also engage?
Right. I myself, yeah, that's definitely a good point. Like nonprofit, grassroots organizations that work in housing, human services. I personally don't know any, or can't think of any of them off the top of my head, but I know organizations that have subcommittees on housing, like We Act for Environmental Justice, where they have like, now they separated their housing into like NYCHA and like regular housing. So I know that we could look into that as well, where there's an organization that has like a bigger goal, like environmental justice, and then they have like housing as a subcommittee, and we could somehow collaborate with that. So just to be more inclusive. But I did do a little Google search. I do see like Westside Foundation Senior Housing, nonprofit, Broadway Housing Communities. Not sure if anyone has heard of these.
And
uh-huh.
Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation is a big one
Yes.
in Washington Heights.
Okay.
I was gonna name any legal aid that has us as their catchment, for one. Because often not only are they advocating for tenants and benefit recipients, et cetera, in our district, but they may also be pushing policy. They may also be, attempting from, being boots on the ground and seeing how things are happening in ways that they should not be happening. You will put forward efforts and even do research and put out reports relevant to those things. So I would say the legal aids, and yeah, there's other organizations. I thought of something, but I dropped my thought. I'll come back to it if I remember.
May I add a couple thoughts here?
Yeah.
One, I just want to amplify what Jay just said about Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. It's really one of two, as best I know, multi-service organizations in Upper Manhattan, often called NIMIC from its initials, and Cloth, which is based in Southern Washington Heights, which is also a multi-service organization, but does quite a bit of affordable housing development work. NIMIC, with its multi-service portfolio, also does a lot of tenant counseling and legal work. And perhaps those two multi-service organizations would be good places for this committee to start. I think Aisha's comments on legal services really important, because that's a really important part of the tenant rights side of our housing work.
Yes. So would that mean like getting in touch with firms that are specifically on housing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that focus on that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad to help identify contacts if that's helpful on any of these.
Of course. Yeah. We'd appreciate
It would be for both, because NIMIC not only does legal aid, they also do benefits counseling and advocacy, and even helping with applying and helping people navigate the pitfalls that exist within those systems as well. So
see.
it would help us broaden our reach where human services is concerned, which is something that as a committee we've talked about over the years, we end up always leaning into housing because housing is always a deficit. And there's always some action around housing, but we don't really do enough of that where human services is concerned.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry, on myself, I'm doing a little Googling. I just bumped into a few things, but I'm trying to vet for it before. But here it's, I see like Stand Up Harlem, not Housing Works. Not sure if anyone has heard of this.
Oh, I know what I was gonna say.
Go ahead.
Tenant organizations that exist, like RENA. RENA, it's a coalition. They help organize tenants. But there's other groups like RENA that do a similar thing.
Mhm.
Like Palante.
Like Palante, right?
Heard of Palante, yep.
Oh, Palante.
Thank
So
you.
Jeannie
Can I-
Dubnow, who's one of the heads of RENA, would be glad to speak to this group, and I can ask her.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can
Okay.
you say her name one more time, Briz?
Dubneau, Jeannie, Geanie. She's
Okay.
my neighbor.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
they've been
Okay.
out there from Inwood rezoning to you name it, they're out
Yep.
there.
They do great work.
Great. Can I then, just to keep us on time, because we do have a few other things on the agenda, and this has been a great discussion thus far, and thank you, everyone. Of course, we'll start with the resource document. There have been some great suggestions. What I can do is, after this evening's meeting, at some point this week, and maybe come up with a list of action points, and where maybe there are bits and pieces where some of you, even if you have those relationships or colleagues in those organizations, and you would be willing to start that conversation, that would be incredibly helpful. Again, because it is a team, and so it'd be really great to see all of you as well, kind of becoming a bit more active in the committee and kind of working on all these issues together. So I think that's maybe what we can do for next steps. And of course, if there are any other organizations that come to mind that are not in the resource document and that have not been mentioned this evening, you can, of course, share those via email, and then we can kind of move it from there. That's, if it's okay, Emily, I'm going to go ahead and move on to
Yeah.
new business. That's what we had have next on the agenda. And so, as I mentioned briefly, we've been in touch with Steve from Health and Environment on two separate issues. One is the mental health remarks that the mayor has kind of put forward regarding how police officers and social workers and first responders should address or kind of interact with people experiencing mental health crises, in terms of kind of asking or not asking, but putting these individuals or giving them medical attention even if they refuse. And so there's been, again, a lot of backlash to that, and we would like to host something around that jointly. Just because the other issue we've been talking about is around sanitation. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm getting a internet connection sign, which isn't good. Okay. I'm going to turn off my video just for bandwidth, if that's okay. Okay, here we go. Great. And so the other issue is around sanitation. So this is if you recall, we received a letter of recommendations from Community Board 4 regarding sanitation issues in the borough. And my understanding is that has now led to the proposal that many of you may now be familiar with, which is increased pickup times for sanitation, in terms of, the bins, the trash receptacles that buildings put their garbage in, they need to be closed. There's a series of different things there. And so we are looking to have, again, a joint meeting with the Health and Environment Committee. We're still working through what that will look like, but the reason we're bringing it up this evening, because of course we would welcome your feedback and your thoughts on what that could look like. Part of it is a suggestion was made, was to invite the Department of Sanitation. My understanding is that they actually are going to come to a future meeting at some point to discuss kind of these increased pickup times and in trash and so on and so forth. So again, a lot of kind of information, a lot of things are up in the air, but would like to get your thoughts on those two things. Again, the sanitation bit, working with health and environment, but also on the mental health issue, working with health and environment. Bruce, over to you.
Yeah, would you include the composting pickup program in that discussion? Because our neighborhood's been pushing for it. And downtown has it, but we're still the poor stepchildren.
So I have not read the entire, if that also, I'm not sure if that also includes composting, but if they come, that's certainly something we can ask for sure. I don't see why not. I guess my question more so this evening is about the format of how we organize ourselves with the Health and Environment Committee and how we host that discussion.
Oh, okay.
Any
Thank you.
thoughts? But yeah, no, great point. Richard?
Couple of different things. One, I think the joint meetings, especially on mental health issues, I'm glad you're moving on that. I think it's a good thing. I think this committee, mental health issues have traditionally at CB12 been a health and environment committee issue. There's been a lot of interest at this committee, and I think working together is worth doing on that. And I'm glad it's something I'm glad to be helpful on in any way I can. On sanitation issues, just a smaller thing. About 2-3 months ago, Councilwoman Carmen De La Rosa did a really good town hall meeting on sanitation issues. There were about 200 people there. The sanitation commissioner was there. And you might want to use a small part of your meeting tomorrow just to see what they have in terms of resources, issue lists, connections. I think they put an awful lot together, and you might be in just the right spot to connect with some of that tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I did see that event and unfortunately I couldn't make it. And I'm glad to hear that it was well attended. So I'll put that on the list for tomorrow. Aisha?
So I've been thinking about how to phrase this. I know we're talking about how to shape a future meeting. So I, for about 6 months, participated in doing surveys across the country. Some of the surveys that I did were specific to homeless people and how they are treated and whether they can be criminalized for, different things like not accepting services or for being in public spaces that they're not allowed to be in, etc. So in that, I was able to see politically, because a lot of times those surveys were paid for by people that have political interest. They may be running for office. They may be trying to understand what their constituencies feel about something so they know whether it's going to harm them politically if they take those steps and all those things. So I feel like while this is coming from our mayor, it's coming from somewhere else as well. It's a constructed effort. And so I'd like to know more about how pervasive this is, right? How many places, because I know of at least a few states that had the same agenda to do the same thing, and already are doing it. And now it's come to New York, which I never thought would have been the case. Honestly, because I feel like we are so much more progressive usually. And I also know that there's an overlap in this where people are dealing with mental health issues, that it doesn't give us the opportunity to have a lens to what the true causations, because of HIPAA, that information cannot be released. How can we navigate to have an understanding of how to help these communities better when this is the way things function, right? Because like, for instance, a question that I had is someone that worked at the Armory in the shelter there said they felt a lot of the people there were former veterans. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I can't really ask if it's a violation of their HIPAA rights that someone might tell me. But if that is true, then isn't part of our charge to hold the VA accountable? Or, you know what I mean? So this is, and this just putting it out, I don't know the answer to it. It's just putting it out to the committee to see, some other thoughts.
May I add a couple things there?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I hear us, I mean, I like what I hear. I hear us talking about homeless issues in a number of different ways, and I think it could probably serve us well if we brought those pieces together. We're looking to engage with the Department of Homeless Services around broader issues at the Armory, but I think that's also the place for the kind of issues that just came up around homeless policy, impacts on homeless people in this district, and any of a number of other ways of looking at this. And, perhaps part of the process is as we move towards what it is that we do public on this, is to get a list to the Department of Homeless Services of things that we want researched and would like to be able to get answers on at whatever meeting it is that we do.
Thank you. I agree. I just wanted to add, I think public
Richard.
safety is another committee that has a connection to this.
For sure. And that goes to the point that was made. I think it was Kimberly that made it earlier, about how we can better work or collaborate more closely with other committees. And a lot of it also ties a bit into, what I had spoken about previously, the intersectionality of a lot of these issues. And when you're looking at these things from a human rights perspective, it's not just housing and human services, it's not just public safety, it's not just health and environment, but it's all of them, in varying ways. And so how can we better do that? So thank you all for that. That's really helpful information. Anything else on new business before we move on to old business? Okay, I don't see any hands. Okay, great. So moving on to old business, I first want to just provide everyone with an update on 705 and 709 West 170th Street. So for those of you who were unable to join the last meeting, we were joined by a representative from the Department of Buildings last month. And two of the issues that we spoke about, one was about the status of these two distressed buildings, but then we also spoke about the after hours work variances. As it relates to the, just trying to pull up the email that I received earlier today on this. Okay, let's see. As it relates to those buildings, 705 and 709, Adriana has been, she was the representative that we spoke with, and let me just, she has continued to remain in touch with one of the residents. So one of the residents that attended the meeting last month has been in contact with her. And from what I understand, it looks like the building tenants had come together and they were hiring a super to hopefully start working on some of the repairs of the building. The building owner was supposed to hire a super, and the super, I believe, is starting at some point this month. And they're going to start working on repairs in the building. And, the hope is that it will help address some of the issues that are there. I also understand that they've been in contact, or they've been put in contact with someone at HPD. They were experiencing some issues regarding a fallen ceiling, and HPD was able to show up, and my understanding is that it was repaired. So I just wanted to share that with all of you, since we did have that lengthy discussion last month. This is what was shared with me today by the Department of Buildings. Aisha, briefly.
So yeah, I did hear that a super is being hired. There are still questions as to whether that super is going to be the super for both buildings, one building. And what the supers, I think the super may be moving into one of the apartments. But the reason why I raised my hand is because, and I didn't want to be antagonistic. It's hard for us to get agencies to come appear before us. I tried to push a little bit, but questions were not answered by DOB. I maybe she didn't have the answers, but there's certainly answers that we should be getting, which are, what is the agency's responsibility? There are clocks attached to these situations, right? Like a report is made, an inspector is sent out, the landlord is contacted and given X amount of days to comply with whatever. And if that is not done, then something happens. And we didn't get answers to that, right? And in that, I'm sure we would glean that the agency has dropped the ball where these buildings are concerned, because these reports have been on record for a while. And aside from 705 and 709, I think it's something that we in our charge should know about the process so that we can advocate for people, know when something has gone awry, but also in the event that we need to suggest a policy change because we see that it's not effective in our district, or that funding should be allotted for something. We know what the terrain is that we're navigating. So we still need those answers to those questions.
Thanks, Aisha. Just really briefly, and then we can move on to the next bit on the agenda. So my understanding is she is new to the role, and so she is kind of still inquiring and kind of finding out. She did say that she did raise this with her supervisor, but I do agree with you around the wider points of us as a committee, all of us, being more well-informed in terms of the different processes and how things need to, should happen, should we say. So that way, when things are brought to our attention by other community residents, we can say, well, this is, how it should be, and this is the agency you need to go to, and this is the process, and so on and so forth, because that's what we're here to do. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. She did say that she'll continue to keep us updated, and so I can follow up in regards to your point regarding the actual process, so that we can all be informed moving forward. So thank you for that. Okay. Anything else on that? If not, I'll move on to the next point under old business. Okay, guess not. Great. So the next point under old business is to follow up on, we had a brief discussion last month on the status of the public forum regarding the Fort Washington Armory. And so I had spoken about creating an event template, which I have kind of some jotted down bits and pieces, which I need to finalize, but it's coming along. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts, to spend a few more minutes in terms of discussing this. I know we addressed, or we talked about potential attendees. And so this is the list that I have from last month: public health officials, city planners, programmers, elected officials, agencies responsible, procurements and contract agreements, law, DHS, of course, the Parks Department, neighborhood advisory boards, was kind of what we discussed in terms of the stakeholders that need to be invited to it. Of course, the Fort Washington Armory itself and the foundation, the Armory Foundation, excuse me, and so on. So we have that on the record. We also talked about putting together a save the date, which I still don't have any information on. I mean, now that we have a new community board chair, that's something that I can raise with Catherine to see if we can get a date on the book. We talked about having it be in a hybrid format. And so with that, we also need to consider, locations to host this. I think it would be ideal if we could have it at the Armory itself. It's a huge space. And, it would kind of make sense for us to host it there for something that we're discussing about how to better use that that building for our community. I wanted to get your thoughts on just briefly the format. I talked briefly about it last month, but just wanted to spend maybe about no more than 10 minutes on the format for it. We talked possibly having groups of stakeholders give a short kind of 2 or 3 minute spiel each. So for instance, you know, you can start off with like welcome and then move into, in no particular order, I'm just speaking out loud and sharing my thoughts. Elected officials, they all say they're, you know, 1 or 2 minutes, a brief kind of engagement with them. Then let's say experts on public spaces, have them share a few words. Agencies, have them share a few words. But what I would like to see at some point is an interactive component where the public can ask questions, where these stakeholders themselves are talking with one another. And so it's also not just kind of electeds, you know, agencies, so on and so forth. So I'm thinking out loud, but would certainly appreciate any thoughts on what the format could look like. Aisha, I'm not sure if that's an old hand or a new hand. Oh, okay, that was an old hand. So any thoughts on the format of the forum, but also on any of the other points? So, you know, how we do our outreach. Again, we have the list of, it would be really helpful to start actually building out that list. Obviously, the list of elected officials and the agencies we have, but the other list, who would be the public health officials we invite, those types of things. Bruce.
Yeah, I see that Phil Zablocki's on as an attendee. Maybe he has some thoughts about this because he's one of the constituents who've been lobbying for this for quite some time, many years.
For sure. I definitely want to give Phil a chance to speak, and anyone else in the public as well. Can I just check though if anyone from the committee wants to share something first, and then I'll give Phil a minute or two, give him 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would say community organizations that are looking for spaces. I'm not quite sure how we would do. I mean, this is all part of like looking out for organizations in general in town, and we could use that resource directory just to reach out to them and let them know about the Armory Foundation and using the space, and if they'd like to, you know, take part in it. In the hearing.
Yeah, and like invite them as attendees to partake in the discussion, because I think it's an issue that'll, you know, it's not just unfortunately facing, you know, it's an issue that a lot of organizations face. How do you find free, safe, or low cost spaces to run community programs that, you know, we also desperately need in our community.
Or even schools.
So I don't.
Probably like schools for after school programs, they probably do need bigger spaces to do certain things. Yep. I would say that.
Yeah, for that I can contact, so I also serve on the Community Advisory Board for DYCD. And so a lot of kind of what DYC does is, you know, running, you know, providing grants and things for things like after school programs and community programming. And so I wonder if in that capacity, we could possibly invite someone from there to participate in the discussion. It's a good suggestion. Okay. I don't see any hands from the committee. So I think Phil was on the move. I think he mentioned that he was like on a call or something, but Phil, if you would like to speak or share any thoughts in regards to the format of the public forum, please do share. Okay, see your hand. Let me see. Chanel, I think you may have to unmute him. I don't think I can do that.
I attempted to search my email to see if I had received it. I was looking for an updated version of the reso, because remember when we had the changing of the guards of elected officials? The he stated in the meeting that the resolution would need to go out again to whoever is now in those seats so that they're informed and that they get engaged. So do we have that update of the reso with the new electeds that it went out to?
So, sure. So before we give the mic over to Phil for any questions or thoughts, we do. The issue I'm having is that I cannot find it in my email. So this happened. The updated reso was sent, and I recall because I was copied on it, but it also happened when I was moving off the community board. And so I've been looking and I've been asking for a follow-up for that, and I have not received it. Let me keep looking in my inbox and see if I can find it, but I have asked the staff for it again. And I think, let me check and see if maybe it's been updated online, but when I last checked, the one that's on the website is the old one with the older elected officials. So
And I
I'm gonna
just,
turn it over to, yeah, not a problem. Phil, over to you.
Can you folks hear me okay? Hello, hello?
we can hear you.
Yes, we can
yes,
hear you,
we hear
sorry.
you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, this is part of the background noise. I'm actually at ShopRite doing the food shopping for a week, so if you hear the music in
And
the
can
background,
fail.
exactly. Actually, what comes to mind for the public hearing is probably more of a concern, and I'll explain. I'll try to be brief in 2 minutes. I'm not sure how this could be fit in, but as the record has shown with DHS and other folks, is whenever you ask them anything, their recorded responses, we'll look into that and we'll get back to you. And my biggest fear of going into a public meeting is that we're going to be given that answer to like almost every question from them and any other stakeholder or politician. So I'm wondering if we can somehow give them a whole list of questions and items well ahead of time, that it doesn't give them an excuse to come into that public hearing and say, we're going to have to get back to you on that one. I'm sorry, we don't really have the answer to that. That's really the thoughts that I wanted to share tonight, is how do we have them prepared so they can come in with answers to what we've been asking for a very long time. And then, of course, there's going to be other questions that are going to pop up that we would hope that they can answer on the fly during a public meeting. But that was really the first thought that came to mind. So that's an open-ended question there, is how, can we do that? Can we give them a list of items and questions that we expect them to be prepared to answer on top of what people will have to ask at the public hearing?
So, Phil, my first thought to that, and your concern is valid. I say, why can't we? And what could that look like? I mean, what comes to mind is possibly, we said that we would like to send out a save the date. What if the save the date includes like a link to a Google form of some sort, where we ask people to submit any questions that they may have through that link? And this, again, thinking out loud. And the committee receives those questions, and we can collate them and ensure that those attending the public forum have those questions with sufficient time, and we can figure out what that timeline looks like. Maybe it's probably, I would say at minimum a month, so that there's no, oh, well, we didn't have enough time to look into it, or so on and so forth. So that they can come prepared, to discuss and actively engage. What I would say is, if we do it that way, then we also need to think about how can we make it accessible, or that process accessible, to people who may not feel comfortable using a Google form or may not be aware of that. And that, of course, could be one of the community board meetings where we would say, we're accepting questions, we're having this public forum on such and such date. We're excited, if you have questions about, what's happening, or suggestions or whatever, come to this, community board meeting. We're going to collate them and share them with the agencies. That's my initial thought, but open to others.
Just to add on to that,
Yep.
and Aisha will appreciate what I'm about to say, is infamous list of 23 questions
I was
that
gonna bring them up. Was my
were
next
given to
statement.
them a long time ago. And that, could definitely be a starting point for a list of questions. But go ahead, Aisha.
Yeah, and I do have that list of questions, and we followed up and still waiting. Aisha, over to you briefly.
I'm coming up for this because the infamous list of 23 questions that some of them were started just from the members of the community that were engaged in, trying to get this addressed. But most of those questions came out of this committee, from the work of this committee, right? And it's just completely been dodged. And me insisting on getting them answered brought a lot of pressure on me. Eventually, I was removed as chair of housing for reasons that really that had no basis, right? So there's a power structure outside of this committee that doesn't want those questions answered, right? But we deserve to have the answers to those questions. I'm so glad that Phil raised this, because I agree with him. That is what we will see if we allow it to manifest that way. So I think the work is for us to insist on those answers. And because the reason why is those 23 questions will yield the structure of what has happened and what should be in place, right? So that we have an understanding of how not to let this happen again. Like, a man was sleeping in a bedroom in a city-owned building for years, that space could have been servicing all of us in different ways, right? It's about how do we get the accountability in place to prevent this from happening again. And I think that getting those answers ahead of time and putting out a report that says, here's what the truth is, here's what the agency says, here is what our mission is, right? Which is basically shaped by the resolution that we already put out. And that what I am afraid of is if we send out a Google form and people engage and answer questions there, that then it will limit the public session at the public hearing, which I think we would benefit from it being obviously having, everyone speak from their own stakeholder positions, but I think we benefit from allowing it to be a town hall, event where people can speak in public.
Thanks, Aisha. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think, to your point, but also Phil's, that if we accept the questions beforehand, we would limit a kind of an open session during the event itself. I think we should still have that for sure, because I would imagine the conversation would open up, other questions and so on, or suggestions and so forth. So there's that bit, and I'll add that to the document. But over to Jay and then Emily.
I just wanted to, I don't know what questions we're talking about, besides the reference in the resolution. I was hoping that could be shared with us. And this is to DHS, right? Is that what we're?
Correct. So the questions, yes.
Have
So
you
the
tried
question-
have
Go
you
ahead.
tried the route of going through the elected officials? I'm telling you, these people respond to elected officials more than they do it.
So before Aisha responds, and I also want to let Phil go. And again, the night is getting late, so I do want to, let's keep our points as succinct as possible. We, but also many others before me, have tried, and it has been a bit challenging. And so it's an ongoing effort, shall we say. Aisha quickly, and then Phil, and then I think Emily.
So the borough president had to insist that they come to our meeting in the first place. So we did engage elected officials to get them to engage with us. but we even had to pass a resolution saying that they're violating the spirit of the charter. We're a city agency like they are. And it is they're supposed to be in communication with us, coming to the cabinet meetings, et cetera, and still. So this is where we are still.
Have we tried the council members where I was going?
So quite honestly, part of the issue is the council members passed. I would say to an extent, one may have been complicit, the other one kind of silent. So there's definitely a dropping the ball that took place overall, which I think is part of the reason why people don't want to step into the fire of the situation, because it lends towards, well, what were you doing about it? How did it happen? So I feel like it's, the issue that nobody wants to get near, but it obviously needs to be resolved.
Thanks, Aisha. Phil and then Emily.
I just had a quick question. Is there a community board template for the structure of a public hearing? I've never been part of one, but I know they've been held before. Is there a template for how it's held, and like you were mentioning, what should be mentioned in what order? Is there a template for us to follow?
Not that I know of, Phil. So I'm just to the earlier point, and you might have dropped off the call. So I'm a program manager by training, and so I live by templates and kind of processes and how things happen and what needs to happen next. And it's very helpful for me to see those types of things. And so what I suggested was for us to at least write it down, which I'm working on. And once it's a little in a kind of more presentable fashion, we can share it at a future meeting, just to organize ourselves in terms of how we would like to see it go forward. But if there is one, please
I'd be
do
curious.
share, or if others
No,
know.
I'm just wondering, maybe if you ask maybe Ebenezer, maybe he might have something from other ones that have been held. Just throwing it out there.
What I have
Yeah, no,
seen,
good suggestion. Thank you.
what I have seen at, I think may have been a committee meeting, but at a public hearing also, that I think could be good is for the community to put on Post-its ideas that they have for how the space can be used. And then we can gather those and maybe, put out a statement about what we got back.
Okay, yeah, like active brainstorming types of activities and things like that. Yeah, I ran some similar exercises with another group I'm a part of. Yeah, that could be an option. Emily, and then Jay, is that an old or new hand?
That's old, sorry.
Okay, not a problem. So over to you, Emily.
Yeah, my question was almost the same as Phil's, like if it's allowed to, if there's like a certain time limit for hearings or forums, because we call it forum, we call it hearing, but I guess it could be both, it could be one of them. So I'm not sure if somehow, because we still do want them to answer these 23 questions, but then if we do this Google form, or we would just prefer people to ask the questions, and then we do the questions that weren't asked from the 23 questions after. But I'm not too sure like what is the structure. That's another question that I had. So I do want the 23 questions to be answered. So if it's like separate, I'm pretty sure it's going to come up from the public. So whatever doesn't come up, we could just ask from those questions. But having some kind of like an action-based thing, because
exactly, yep.
It's true what Phil, I should say that they probably do have like all these responses in their pocket that they usually use during any kind of meeting, and we don't want that. We want something that actually is more using the SMART goals. So or like more like, like a response that's very whole and true. So I'm not too sure how we can get that in part into the actual agenda of whatever we're gonna do, whether it's a forum hearing or both.
No, it's a really good point. And I think, there's always a bit about what are the purposes for events? Is it to inform? Is it to persuade? Is it to, there's different purposes for it. And what I'm hearing, the purpose of this is, not to inform, but also to, action. We want action from these stakeholders. Okay, great. So there's a couple of action points for us on that exactly. So I will continue to work on this document, and I will see if I can find, and I'll follow up again with the staff regarding the updated resolution. And I'm going to keep looking at my inbox because I've looked for it and I don't know where it's at, but I recall seeing it. Okay, anything else under old business? Okay, I don't see anything. That's my
I do have
daughter
a-
sleeping. If you hear that.
Yeah, I heard. I do have something I forgot to mention for new business. I got a resource about buildings after hours. They have the Department of Buildings. They have free in-person information sessions with DOB staff every Tuesday from 4 to 7 p.m. at your local borough office. So I don't know how to put this link into the Q&A. For some reason, I don't get like a little slot to put it in there. But I'm pretty sure if you Google like nyc.gov, look for Department of Buildings, and they're going to have that free in-person information session info there every Tuesday out.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful. Maybe that the board staff can share it on the listserv. So maybe share with Ebenezer and the team, and they can share it so that way others can have access to that information. Thanks for that. All right, so seeing no other hands for old business, we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 8:57 p.m. Can I get a second?
I second. Unless
Well,
yeah,
motion
was
first.
that
but- Thank you, Emily. So Bruce motion, Emily second. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, as always, for your time and your commitment to the committee, but also the issues. And I look forward to a fulfilling but impactful 2023. And see you later this month for the general meeting. Bye.
Good night.
bye y'all.